Today on Locked On Red Wings, ranking the teams in the Eastern Conference.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty's host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. On today's episode, we're going to be giving you guys a Eastern Conference rankings. We're doing it a little bit differently than we have in previous years. Previously, we've tried to predict exactly where these teams are going to fall in the standings. This year, we're going to do a literal tier list of each team in the Eastern Conference today, Western Conference on Friday. And I think this will help inspire a little bit more of a fun conversation for us, Scotty, as well as, just give us a little bit more breathing room in terms of whether we're right or wrong, because you just split hairs between 6th and 7th place or for 2nd and 3rd place in a division. So I think this it inspires a little bit more of a creative discussion. That is the word I was trying to think of about 5 minutes ago. Scotty, how you doing today?
I'm doing great.
That's good. I'm good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
The Tigers playing the Rockies. That's super.
Do
vital.
they? Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. They first pitch here in a little bit, so.
Gotta thank you guys for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Oh, Scotty, there's a thrown away recording in which, yeah. Anyways, we're going to present this slide for you guys, assuming I can remember how to share my screen. I'm technologically challenged. Thank you, Scotty. Yeah. I appreciate it, brother.
And look,
and I'm going to change the background. There you go. I'm also going to zoom in a little bit here for the people.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. That looks nice. All right, Scotty, I think the best way to do this is probably to go in reverse order of where they placed in the standings this last year, which means that the team that placed last in the Eastern Conference last year is the Columbus Blue Jackets. Finished with 66 points last year in 82 games played. Obvious moves, trading away Patrick Laine, and of course, we talked about it last week, the tragic passing of Johnny Gaudreau. It's hard to transition into talking about the team and how they'll do this year, but I do think that they're probably going to remain in that tank commander area, especially with Caden Lindstrom as well, having injured himself as well, might miss the start of training camp. I struggle to see this team being better than a tank commander tier here on this list.
Yeah, I agree, and I can't imagine that that's the focus that anybody in the fan base or the organization has this upcoming season for reasons, again, that, the Gaudreau family and whatnot that we've talked about. So, I agree with you. Weren't very good team last year. Didn't take a lot of steps this year, unfortunately. But, yeah, certainly not the focus of the Blue Jackets and their fan base at the present moment, or likely this entire upcoming season.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll go ahead and throw them there. And Scotty as well. I didn't really preface the tiers here because it's easy for us to just look at it because we always stream like this. But people who are listening on audio only, the tiers here that we're using to rank these teams is Stanley Cup contender, which is the highest, divisional spot contender, so not necessarily divisional winner, because we felt like in a lot of those instances, teams that win the division are probably the bigger threats to win the Stanley Cup anyways. Wild card contender, misses playoffs, and tank commander. And obviously, we led with tank commander for the Columbus Blue Jackets here this season for the reasons we just stated. Again, as Scotty put, not the focus for this team this year, but that's just where they're going to be at likely based on the players they have. And they have some really fun players too, like young, fun players on their roster. Adam Fantilli is going to be a huge piece of their core moving forward, but it's going to be a couple years before they can move out of that tank commander position and push.
For sure.
Scotty, next up, because we have 16 teams to talk about today, Montreal Canadiens. Speaking of Patrick Laine, this is the team that he got traded to. And I think this is the Montreal Canadiens. I was saying last year, even though they finished 8th place, like they were a team that fought hard every single game. They got Juraj Slafkovsky as well. They had another high draft pick again this year. Nick Suzuki looks like a great player. I think that this team personally probably is out of the tank commander phase. I think they are now in kind of like just into that. They're going to be like late single digits, low teen draft pick status in the Eastern Conference this year. Not that doesn't mean they're going to be close to a wild card, but I think that the years of intentionally tanking are behind them.
Yeah, honestly, I thought I was going to have to come to war on here and really kind of plant a flag in the Habs and what I think they're going to be this year. I think this is a misses the playoffs team. I don't think that this is a team that is going to like barely miss the playoffs, right? I don't think that they're going to finish with like 85 to 90 points or anything like that. But I still think they're probably the last place team in the Atlantic. But the Atlantic is crazy, as we talked about yesterday. The Atlantic is a really, really good division. And I'm kind of lockstep with you. They have a lot of really good young players. They have a young core to build around. Obviously, Suzuki is we talk about a lot on this show and is a guy that continues to grow with that organization. I kind of like the Habs this year. 76 points last year is like not bad. The East is just crazy good. And so I think, seeing them get into that 80-point total, I don't think is that ridiculous. And 91 points was a playoff team last year. So, I mean, if they can be within 10 points of the postseason, I think that's super on the table for the Habs this year.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see them push 80 points. Even last year, it's so easy to forget that like 76 points, I mean, that's pretty stark difference from where the real bottom feeders in this team were. Like San Jose, Chicago, and the Ducks, none of them passed 60. So that's three teams right there. And then you had the Blue Jackets at 66. So like this is a team in Montreal that like is still – they're trying to climb back to mediocrity right now, but they're not like a bottom of the barrel worst team ever. I think they'll probably be like 8th, 9th, 10th maybe in terms of where they pick. Scotty, from there, we are going to, let me place the team on the tier list first. We are in Mrs. Playoff tier. From there, we're going to move on to the Ottawa Senators, who finished 14th in the Eastern Conference with 78 points, just 2 points ahead of the Montreal Canadiens this last season. Scotty, what do you make of the Ottawa Senators? They're one of the more interesting conversations.
Yeah, you're telling me, man. We talked about yesterday how Vegas is pretty high on this team. This is something that, FanDuel is higher on the Sens than they are the Red Wings, and I think that's kind of ridiculous given where both teams were at this year and how their offseason. Obviously, we talked about the huge addition in that the Senators made this offseason, but I don't know. I'm still if you want to put him in wild card contender, like I'd be okay with that, but I think I'm still kind of default to just misses playoffs again.
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult with the Ottawa Senators because every single year we put them in the wild card contender.
Every year they have the talent to be a wild card contender or better, and every single year they death taxes and like not winning a game until American Thanksgiving. Like that's just how it goes.
And the acquisition of Linus Ullmark will be huge in that. I don't think he'll be Boston Bruins Linus Ullmark, but I think he's going to be the best goalie that they've had in years, still regardless, and that's going to be a huge help. But like the Red Wings, they struggle possession wise, and their goalies got shelled. And I don't see Linus Ullmark's going to help. But unless you start, this conversation is the same with the Red Wings. Unless you start, cutting down on the amount of shot attempts you face per night, the goalies are gonna continue to give up shots. I know the Red Wings at times did a good job of keeping those shot attempts to low danger area, and the high danger were the tough ones. But I want to put them in the wild card contender because I think they have the makings of a team that can make the playoffs. But we saw it again last year. It's just hard to do that. And we're going to have probably, because of how stacked the Atlantic Division is, probably a lot of teams in the wild card contender category. Yeah. Because there's a lot of teams I could see contending for the wild card. I don't know, Scotty. I still think that this team, as much as there's venom between these fan bases, I still think this Ottawa Senators team is a wild card contender. I really do.
I'm fine with that.
All right. Let's hit another one quickly here because we have 16 teams to get through before this episode's over. Next up in the Eastern Conference is the New Jersey Devils. Had 81 points in 82 games played. Now, Scotty, this is a New Jersey Devils team that I thought was going to be a Stanley Cup contender going into this season, this last season rather. And then some really untimely injuries, right? Mm-hmm. Injuries just coming at the worst time to their best players. This team did not turn out the way that I expected them to turn out. But that being said, I do have very high hopes that they're going to bounce back and get right back into the divisional spot contender category that they were in the year before.
Yeah, this was a team that last year I should have really gone out on a limb more than I did. I remember talking about how I expected them to take a pretty big step back, but still expected them to be a playoff team and whatnot. And they end up taking a massive step back. As you mentioned, though, a lot of that due to some really untimely injuries. But I think that I'm okay with division spot contender. I have them in wild card contender. I think that that's a little bit more feasible. But again, like we saw 2 seasons ago, that this team at its best can legitimately be a Stanley Cup contender. So like they're kind of another wild card where as long as you're not putting them in the tank area, like they could really be anywhere and it would kind of be justifiable.
Yeah, I like them. And, they did reinforce some of the aspects as well. They got Brett Pesce, they got Dougie Hamilton on their team now as well. So I think that with that combined with that incredible young core that they have with Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier, I do really like this hockey team. I do think that they can be a divisional contender yet again.
Works for me.
Cool. Let's put them in there. All right, Scotty, we're going to head to a quick break, and when we return, we'll keep this conversation going. So stay tuned to Locked On Red Wings. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation helps make it easier to save more on sports, concert, comedy, theater, and so much more. And by toggling the all-in pricing feature, it'll show the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout, but you must toggle all-in pricing to on. Get a panoramic view from your seat before you buy using Seat Views, and Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference using that lowest price guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, we are now on to the 5th from bottom in the NHL, and that brings us to the Buffalo Sabres, a team that I, pat myself on the back here, rightfully predicted would take a step back this past year. That being said, Scotty, do you believe they'll stay there or take a step back forward in the upcoming season?
Take a step back forward. Wow, that's
you knew what I meant. Take a step back in the right direction.
That's deep. I'm gonna take Mrs. Playoffs here. I think when I look at the outlook of the Eastern Conference, we're expecting Ottawa to be better. We expect New Jersey to be better. There's a couple of teams that I'm sure ahead of Buffalo that we're expecting to come back down a little bit in the standings, but I don't think it's enough for me to think that Buffalo is going to legitimately play for the wild card. I think they'll be in the mix late like they were this year, but like ultimately still missed by 7 points. Like it wasn't a nail biter at the end of the season, but in late March or in, I guess, probably early March, there were still some aspirations for them to make. And I think they're probably around that same bar. I don't expect Buffalo to fluctuate too much in one direction. I kind of think they're still just what they are, right? Like they have some really good offensive pieces. There's still a lot of left to be desired, I guess I'll say, defensively.
Yeah, this team drives me nuts. This is another team where I just look at the youth that they have, the talent on the high-end talent that they have, and it frustrates me that they can't break their playoff streak. Like, and don't get me wrong, I'm a Red Wings fan first and foremost, so I would rather their playoff drought continue than ours. But like as an NHL fan, I look at the talent on this team with Tage Thompson, with Dylan Cousins and Alex Tuch, and on the back end, Rasmus Dahlin, Owen Power. And you saw a little bit of a resurgence from Bowen Byram, too, after he got dealt from Colorado to them. And not to mention the crazy season Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen had as well. Like, there are pieces here that make a lot of sense, but they still have not addressed their biggest issue, which is defense. Like, yeah, you got Bowen Byram, but he was struggling with Colorado. So, like, this is a team that still defensively has a lot left to be desired. And you're asking them to then again do what they did 2 years ago and outscore their problems, in which the Red Wings did this past year. And for both those teams, it didn't work out in the end. And you're hoping that works to make the playoffs. I mean, you could, I guess, if you're working on the assumption that Rasmus Dahlin is going to take another step forward, Owen Power is just 21, he could take another step forward. Like, I guess you could bank on that and them getting better defensively, but I just don't. As it stands right now, this team I see being in the same tier that they were this last year, which is misses the playoffs. And I think that they very well should be in wild card contender, but I struggle to see them in that, like, really being in it unless they start to address like their biggest need, which is the defensive side of the puck.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you. Next up, Scotty, Philadelphia Flyers. The Flyers. John Tortorella and the Flyers. He took over 2 years ago, missed the playoffs 2 straight years this last year with 87 points. He single-handedly eliminated the Red Wings on the final day of the season because he did not know that the Red Wings had just eliminated him 30 seconds prior. How are we feeling about the Philadelphia Flyers this year?
This is a weird one because they were in the playoffs going into the trade deadline. They were well into the postseason, and Danny Briere pretty much said, we don't care. We're sticking to the plan, and sold at the deadline despite the kind of huge exceeding of expectations. We all thought they were going to be toward the bottom of the standings last season, and they grossly exceed expectations. Briere holds to his guns and says, I don't care. I'm still going to sell, and the plan is still the plan. And then now they're here, and it's this weird spot to be at, and I'm. You know what? They're the only team that I look at. Well, maybe not only team. I don't know. I look at them, and I could be convinced to put them in Tank Commander, to be honest with you. But I'm okay with Mrs. Playoffs just because of, again, they had 87 points last year. I don't think that was a complete mistake. But like again, they still sold at the deadline. Like they still got rid of their best. Not best, but some of their better assets last year, and still clearly have a plan in place to be competitive in the future, and not necessarily right now.
I mean, I could be convinced to put them in Tank Commander too, right? Like you said, Danny Briere and even John Tortorella, even when they were playing at a high level under John Tortorella, getting that Tortorella bump, he was saying like this team's not good enough. Like they were saying that all season long, mitigating expectations despite how well they were playing, that this team's not a playoff team and that they are trying to, I don't know if rebuild's the right word, but restructure. Like they committed to Travis Konechny this offseason.
Yep.
They brought over that Russian goaltender. They signed Matvei Michkov. Like there are signs of like a core really in the future
going forward. Yeah.
But I don't think that that's going to have a big enough impact this year to get them out of the misses playoffs category. And like you said, after selling off at the deadline, I think they'll stay in misses playoffs just because of the Tortorella effect. But I think that they probably should be in the Tank Commander category. Like this is why would you? I feel like Tortorella is kind of I struggle to say not the greatest fit, but when you're a team that's where they are, Tortorella's the type of coach you bring in to bring you over the hump. And you brought in that coach when your team is being torn down, or restructured at least. So I don't know. But I mean, hey, I said the same thing about the Canucks and the Winnipeg Jets like last offseason, and then they doubled down on their core and both had great years. So what do I know? We'll do one more here before we get into segment 3. Next up is the Pittsburgh Penguins. They finished 10th in the Eastern Conference with 88 points. This is a team that's pretty much another year older. and I feel like their playoff window is really toast, Scotty. I really do. Like, anything's possible when you have Crosby on your team, true, but like that core of Letang, Malkin, Crosby, and Carlson is just, I struggle to see them being a wild card contender. I really do.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think this is one of the easiest ones we'll do the entire show. I think this is pretty comfortably in Mrs. Playoffs. They are going to be, decent. They'll be okay. They'll be one of those teams that's kind of flirting with being in the hunt graphic there, like post deadline. But they're not going to be. It's going to be kind of a copy paste of what it was last season. They're going to ultimately be pretty comfortably out of the postseason conversation. They missed by 3 points last year. And again, I don't really expect them to take a step forward. I think they just kind of are what they are. They're just going to ride out the Crosby era until that ends. They're just going to kind of be this.
Yep. I think that they are in their Ken Holland trying to keep the playoff streak alive era right now, where you have aging veterans and you just don't want to let go of what was, and instead you're punishing your future self in the long term because you won't embrace reality and what is. They're very much the 2015 to 2018 Red Wings.
Yeah.
So, all right, Scotty, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll finish this up. It's going to be a long segment 3 because we still have about half the teams in the conference to go through.
Yeah, but the top ones will all be pretty easy, so I actually don't think it'll be too long.
Do you almost? I agree with you. Yeah, if we can stop me from going on a 10-minute long tangent about one team individual.
That's an if.
And that's a huge if. Segment 3 coming up. Got to talk to you guys today about Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. So join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire a great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/locked-on. Just go to Indeed.com/locked-on right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Indeed you do.
Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, let's try to hammer out some of these, pick up the pace a little bit, as we are now at the 9th spot in the Eastern Conference, which is held by our Detroit Red Wings at 91 points, missed the playoffs on a tiebreaker. I mean, we talk about the Red Wings all the time. To any of our listeners, you should know pretty well all the changes that have been made on this roster at this point and where we stand on it, which I think, Scotty, for the both of us, is wild card contender.
Yeah, not too much to add. I think they were a wild card contender last season. The outlook of the team has changed, but ultimately, I think the talent level is still around there. Hopefully, they get over the hump. But yeah, they'll be in that mix for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they have some players left. They brought in some new players. They kept some big name players. Another year older for the young core. I think that there is enough there that they will be a threat for the playoffs all the way to the end of the season, and may even be that team in the playoffs as well, God willing, because I'm tired of missing the playoffs. Next up, Scotty, we're going to move on to the Washington Capitals, the team that took advantage of the Philadelphia pulling the goalie and squeaked into the playoffs despite having a negative goal differential of minus 37. Oh, I love the current playoff format. It's fantastic. The Washington Capitals, Scotty, they retooled their roster. They added Pierre-Luc Dubois. They traded away Darcy Kemper to the LA Kings in return. And they brought in Jacob Chychrun, trading out Nick Jensen, among a couple other moves as well. They on paper look like a better hockey team.
Yeah, man, I think this is a kind of a slam dunk for wild card contender here. This is a team that obviously was the wild card last year. Like you said, they retooled. The only thing that somewhat, I don't even want to say concerns me, but something that is just in the back of everybody's mind is like OV chasing the record. And if that becomes too much of the storyline of their season rather than wins and losses, that might throw a wrench into stuff. But I really like the moves they make. This was a team that, if they would have just stood pat, I would have actually felt pretty comfortable putting them in Mrs. Playoffs or even Tank Commander. If they just were like, oh, we're just going to take another year and we're just kind of, make the season be about OV and don't really care about wins and losses, but they didn't. And they went out and they made a lot of moves, and I think they'll be right in that mix again.
Yeah, especially with the addition of Matt Roy, who we talked a lot about, who is a very, very good second pair defenseman. They definitely got some upgrades. I know Pierre-Luc Dubois is one of those guys who, he's, for some reason, people think he's going to be really, really good. And he's got a big paycheck, and this is kind of his last chance to prove that he is the guy that people always thought he was. But, that's still an upgrade on the roster versus what they had last year.
Right.
So I think if they could make the playoffs last year with the roster that they had, and some luck was involved, that they'll still be in that race this year with an improved roster on top of that. From there, Scotty, let's move on to the New York Islanders. God, I hate this team. One of the most boring teams in the league to watch. Jesus. They made the playoffs, Scotty. They had 16 overtime losses to take a divisional spot.
You're just so passionate about the Islanders.
I am.
Where would you like to put them?
In the trash, personally. 16 overtime losses to carry them into the playoffs and into a Metropolitan divisional spot. Honest to God, I could see him miss the playoffs, but I know I'm better than that. Although there's some rumors percolating about their goaltender situation, Sorokin maybe being injured, but they don't have a high-powered offense. Their defensive game wasn't that great last year. They just seem to get lucky. I, honest to God, think they could miss the playoffs. I really do. Especially if I think New Jersey's going to resurge in the Metropolitan. I think that the Islanders could be a Mrs. Playoff contender.
Yeah, I get it. I also think that their system is just their system is their system is their system. And I have a hard time believing that they're just going to take a massive step back given the, the defensive and puck possession type of, again, system that they play. But if it will help you because I love you and you want to, just let some anger out and put them in Mrs. Playoffs, I'll allow it.
I mean, we can put them in wild card contender. It's fine. I understand that I just really strongly dislike this team right now. And that's probably skewing it. They're probably with, Horvat and Barzal on that team. They're probably a little bit better than I think they are. But I just 16 overtime losses to make the playoffs in a I hate this point system so much right now. I'm still haven't recovered. I'm still so
from Brian today. It's okay, man. Life's good.
Also, it's just boring to watch these two teams play.
All right. Maybe
honest to God. All right. Tampa Bay, wild card team from the Atlantic Division, 98 points. Lost Stamkos, lost Sergachev, gained Gensel, regained McDonough. Wild card? I mean...
Wild card. I'm pretty set on wild card there. They've been taking steps back for each of the last 4 seasons. They lose one of the greatest players in franchise history. Obviously, he's not at his peak anymore, but that's still got to count for something. They did bring in some reinforcements, though, so that they don't just completely fall off a cliff. I think this is kind of a slam dunk wild card play.
There's so much wild card competition. I don't like it.
Yeah, the East is ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, they still have Hedman. They still have
here on out.
So
yeah, they're still a great roster. Yeah. From here on out, we kind of get to the easier portion. I feel like.
Yeah, so 5th in the Eastern Conference was the Toronto Maple Leafs, 102 points. I think if I recall correctly, they had a kind of a slow start to the season. And then, of course, finally turned it on. We were that great regular season team that they always are before choking it away in the playoffs again. Scotty, I think this is a pretty easy divisional spot contender.
It sure is.
They did add to their blue line. They signed Chris Tanev as well as Oliver Ekman-Larsson to crazy term deals despite their age. They're going all in right now. I believe they also signed Robertson to a 1-year deal today as we're recording this as well. So their team is their team. They're going to be a lot better defensively. I mean, The only reason I don't put them in Stanley Cup contender is just simply
because
like,
they're the Leafs. Yeah,
we've learned this lesson 1,000 times.
correct.
Like, on paper,
No,
they should be a cup contender.
You are. I was literally. I'm not kidding. I was just about to say that. I was going to be like, if this was the same roster on any other team in the league, we'd be talking about them being a cup contender. But because it's the Leafs, we have them there, and I agree with that.
Like, they have the roster to make a deep run, but they just, every year, they seem to find a way to choke it away. Making the second round, making it beyond the first round one time in the last 20 years is insane. Especially with the talent they have. Scotty, next up, fourth in the Eastern Conference, rather, is the Boston Bruins, another team that I hate with a burning passion for a completely different reason, and their inability to fall off, despite the fact that they have like no center depth. Making big commitments to Nikita Zadorov, as well as Elias Lindholm in free agency. Definitely overpaying for both those guys, but guys that will help bolster their roster for sure. Like, both can be true at the same time, right? Elias Lindholm, obviously, they brought in to play center for the team because they, like I said, have no center depth. Outside of that, and really no one of note that I can tell that they've brought in. They obviously traded away Linus Ullmark, so there's a big question mark regarding the goaltending, if whether or not Jeremy Swayman, and whenever he is signed, can deal with can be the number one goaltender for the Boston Bruins. But Scotty, I still find it's another one. It's the opposite of the Toronto Maple Leafs, where like until they prove otherwise, I have them as a divisional spot contender.
Yeah, man, they were 7 points better than the Leafs and were 5 points away from the Rangers. They were closer to being the best team in the Eastern Conference than they were being the fifth team in the Eastern Conference, and they finished fourth. Like that, they are of the elite of the elite. They are still a cup contender. I don't care. I'm okay putting them in cup. If you want to put them in division, that's fine. But I still think they're amongst the best teams in the NHL, despite the turnover.
Cup contender would be a little bit too high to put them. I mean, they made the cup final, 2019? So it's been 5 years since they've made a deep run with that roster. Even back when they had Bergeron still.
Won a
and
President's
that goalie
trophy in there too.
And did what? Anyways, Carolina Hurricanes.
Okay,
Scotty,
you can say that about every President's trophy forever. So that doesn't mean they're cup contenders.
The Carolina Hurricanes, Scotty.
Right.
Where do you...
Ridiculous argument.
Where do you have them?
Well, you've skipped the Stanley Cup champs there.
Oh, you're right. I skipped over. We'll leave them for last because they're defending cup champs.
Right. Yeah, that's fine.
Accidentally on purpose.
Right. The Canes are really good. To me, this is a cup contender. I mean, if you have an issue with how the Islanders play hockey, it's a little bit different, but it's not a whole lot different. Kind of a similar system there in Carolina, but they are really good and still score as well, where the Islanders do not. So that's kind of the big difference there. I think this is still a slam dunk cup contending team. I still expect them to be one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference, and I still expect them to be in contention to win the Metro.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Scotty. I don't know if I see him as a Stanley Cup contender anymore. Is that wild to say?
I mean, I think so, but I also understand. I understand the sentiment.
Because the way I view it, obviously they lost Brett Pesce is a huge blow. They lost Jake Gensel, who was a trade deadline acquisition. They brought in Shane Gostisbehere, who was their big free agent acquisition, brought him back rather, because he's been on the team before, so they'll get points from defense. But this is a team that like every year kind of proves that they can't play. Their style of play doesn't work in the playoffs, right? Because they play that oppressive, just like not let you have any fun style that the Islanders play. And then come playoffs, when push comes to shove and these players become maniacs, all of a sudden that system begins to fail them because they play a system that doesn't score them a lot of goals. And but they don't give up a lot of goals by proxy either. But that stops working, it seems, in the playoffs. And I feel like I've been burned at this team a couple times that I can't see them as true cup contenders anymore. But am willing to defer to you because I think that they are still a very good hockey team that if you think they're cup contenders, I don't mind putting them there.
Well, it's also, do we only think there's two teams in the entire loaded Eastern Conference that can legitimately win a cup?
I mean, these two are slam dunks in my opinion, but
No, they are slam dunks. I'm saying, are those the only two? Like, with how talented the Eastern Conference is, are we really saying that like only two of these teams have a chance to win the cup?
No, I mean, we said it already. I could see Toronto doing it if they ever got over their weird curse. I mean, I see the argument with Carolina because I felt that same way for the last few years. Right. I think that you could make an argument for up to 4 teams in the Eastern Conference. I just feel like there's only two true slam dunks as cup contenders. But like, I'm fine. Like, Carolina as like a fringe cup contender. That's why I was deferring to the divisional spot contender. But I'm fine with going to cup contender with them.
Sure. Yeah, I still think they're one of the 5 best teams in the NHL. So
yeah. Next up, we have let's go again. We're going to keep the Florida Panthers. We'll go with the President's Trophy winners, the best team in the regular season, the New York Rangers. I think they're pretty easy slam dunk Stanley Cup contender.
Yep. Yeah. And that core is not, super old or over the hill or anything. It's still a relatively young team with some youth throughout there, but obviously they have some really good veterans too. Arguably the best goalie in the sport. Yeah. They're certainly one of the best teams in hockey.
And I mean, they finally got that piece that's going to put them over the hump, Scotty.
Who's that?
Adam Ernie on a PTO.
Right. That's what I was waiting for that. Yeah.
I was going. I don't have any surprises left for him anymore. He knows me too well. Yeah, I mean, they're a complete hockey team, I feel, and I think they're going to continue to go back to that spot. So lastly, we have the Stanley Cup contenders, or Stanley Cup champions, Florida Panthers. Again, slam dunk Stanley Cup contender, but that's not to say without...
Tank commander, dude.
Tank commanders, absolutely. They had a lot of turnover this last offseason, but that core remains intact. They lost Brandon Montour. They lost Vladimir Tarasenko, who they acquired at the deadline, who's now with the Detroit Red Wings. They lost Oliver Ekman-Larsson. So they did lose some pieces, but they were able to retain Sam Reinhart, who scored 50-plus goals this last year. I believe Anton Lundell they also were able to keep. So like they kept the big-name players. And they have one more year left of Aaron Ekblad, who's in his prime too, as well as, of course, Tkachuk and Barkov, who are still there for a long time to come. I don't see this team going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, no, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. Like, even with the players outside of the core having a little bit of turnover, and that's not for nothing. At the end of the day, the core that they have built around for the last several years is the one that won the cup. So clearly, they're in that category.
Yep. And so there you have it for our rankings with the Eastern Conference. We have the Hurricanes, Rangers, and Florida as cup contenders. Jersey Devils, wow, not a lot of divisional spot contenders. New Jersey Devils, Toronto Maple Leafs, and Boston Bruins as divisional spot contenders. Wildcard contenders being Ottawa, Detroit, Capitals, the Islanders, and the Lightning as wildcard contenders. The Habs, Sabres, Flyers, and Penguins as misses the playoffs. And the Columbus Blue Jackets as the tank commander in the East this season. Let us know what you think. Are we way off on some? Do you love this? Let us know in the comments. Scotty, any final thoughts?
Word. No, that's it, man. We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.